Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
I've been working wood for a lot of years. I said between the two of us, Nathaniel, my son, and I, we have 90 years of woodworking experience when we both started building forts when we were 4 years old. The business was called Wooden Things, and then when Nathaniel came back about 5 years ago and joined me in the business, we incorporated and called the company Wood Wildflowers, because that is indeed now what we do. We do laminations of a lot of thicknesses of wood. We'll go and do the part that's going to go with this vase, sunflower. This is a pattern for one of the flowers that are the latest flower, again one of Nathaniel's designs. For me as a father, I couldn't be prouder. It's a really neat thing. Just do a pattern, simple pattern. Draw them on. It's simple to draw it on. It's not necessarily so simple once we move on to the next step. And this will then go to the bandsaw as well. So we come into the bandsaw. This particular piece I'm going to run on this grizzly bandsaw. These flower petals I'll be doing on another bandsaw over there. The bandsaw is one of our tools of choice, probably because the wood we cut is so thick. It just seems to work really well. What we find with the bandsaw is you can do so many things by changing the table, the degree of angle of cut, and all of a sudden you're into some really interesting designs. So that's that. I'll leave this here for Nathaniel. I'm going to go on now and I'll cut out the sunflower that will go in that vase as well. Well, I'm coming into the next bandsaw that I'm using to cut out these flower parts. First thing I have to do is always rough them out before I take them on to the next saw, which is for slicing them thins. We found that we can't really use veneer. If we don't cut the pieces, they will take a natural bend that we can't work them through our forms and get the shape out of them that we wanted to do. So slicing them is about our best option. And now we've created a pattern that we can take further. First thing we'll have to do is drill some holes in it, which I have already done in a piece. You can see already that the patterns are not exactly alike, but it's also one of the beauties of what we do is no matter how many times we cut these out, you'll never have two flowers. They're exactly the same. This is what we're getting down to, is thin strips of wood like so, that we can then cut off and take further in the process. So now we'll turn you over to Nathaniel. This is, I think my job here is done. I get to, actually after this point in time, I usually get to go out, grab a cup of coffee, walk down to the pond and maybe get an idea or something.
Hi, my name is Nathaniel Nienow, and I'm going to continue the process on this vase that my dad started. So first of all, I have the table on the bandsaw set at about a 9-degree angle. Now I'm going to finish the sculpting on this vase, and what that's going to allow me to do, it's going to cut down through the grain at an angle and create a really nice pattern on the face of the vase. After my dad has sliced these flower petals into really thin strips, I'm just going to break them out into individual petals so that they're ready to be sanded and bent. Now they're ready to move on to sanding and final bending. Now we can take these petals over and soak them in hot water, and they'll soak for 15 or 20 minutes and they'll be ready to bend. They're going to dry for 3 or 4 days, and once the wood is totally dry, those petals will hold their shape forever. So after the petals have dried for, like I said, 4 or 5 days, we're going to take those petals out of the forms and then stain them. And here's a box that I've just finished staining. We have enough to do probably about 80 or 100 flowers in here, all nice and bright yellow. So these are going to be our sunflowers, and now I'm going to show you how we do our final assembly on the sunflowers. For stems, I use 1/8" dowels. I stain them green and then soak them in hot water again and bend them very similarly to the way we bend the flower petals. So I'm just going to start by grabbing a handful of these yellow petals and assembling them onto the stems one at a time. And then just a few dabs of cyanoacrylic glue to finish it off. And we'll let that dry for a few minutes. So the final touch for the sunflower is going to be to add the seed area to the center. So for that, I have some black walnut wood shavings. So they create that nice, coarse, bumpy texture. They have the right color, and it allows us to stick with the wood theme so that truly the flower is entirely made out of wood. A little bit of hot glue, just gonna fill in, and I'm just gonna take a whole handful of this black walnut shavings and dump it right on. And there we have the finished sunflower. All right, so now I have some of my finished sunflowers. They have a couple coats of lacquer on them, so they do have a nice sheen to them, makes them easier to dust. And I'm going to just arrange them in this vase. I also have my accompanying leaves. They're bent in the same fashion as the flowers are bent, hot water forms, 4 or 5 days, and they will also hold their shape forever. So I'm just poking all the little pieces right down into the foam. So I like to think of what we do is, it's part design, it's part wood artistry, it's part engineering to come up with all the ways to make everything, and then we get to finish it off by being part floral designers.
Having those creative moments is wonderful. Seeing it come to fruition through the production steps is really good, but going out there and actually selling a part of your time in one of your pieces and having somebody willing to spend their hard-earned money and what they do to buy a piece of your work is, you know, that's pretty gratifying.
If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org. If you have segment ideas pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund by the vote of the people on November 4th, 2008.